who are able to perform miracles, signs, and wonders, and so on. There are so many self-claimers of such power and strength. But in fact, it is pretty hard for us to be able to find someone who is like Jesus. If I ask you whether you know anyone who is an excellent preacher of God's Word, you may be able to figure out a few names from your memories. If I ask you whether there is anyone who can remember as a man of power, a man of prayer, a man of evangelism, a man of hospitality, and so on, then you may be able to come up with certain names from your experiences in the past. But if I ask you a question whether you know anybody who is like Jesus, whose character is just like the image of God, I wonder whether you can figure out any name from your memory at all. If you're a truly blessed person, maybe one or two people. Or if I ask you a question whether you are conformed to the image of Christ Jesus, I wonder you will be able to say, yes, I am. I'm one of those very rare, endangered species within Christian churches. What I'm trying to say is that Christian character is in dilemma today and is in trouble, truly. And besides that, the real problem is that even though there are really shortage of those individuals whose character is after the image of Christ Jesus, there are a lot of people who are to be able to use scripture verses back and forth, who can defend their faith in the name of Christian religion. Not too long ago, I read a book written by someone. This book was published just a couple of years ago. The book title was quite intriguing. The book title is "Living a Secular Life," and so I thought, oh, wow, living a godly life, spiritual life, religious life, or prayer life. And there are so many book titles like that, but living a secular life, that really intrigued my interest. So I began to look for the book and I read it. And this book is quite interesting because it says that humanists can have very reasonable life. And a lot of times religious people are telling atheists and humanists that they cannot have proper morality, proper godliness in their lives, but that is a nonsense. And the author said, look around the world. For example, he gave us an example of Jamaica. Sorry, if you are familiar to the country. And he said, if you are turning to the right, you may be able to find a Catholic, Roman Catholic. And if you turn to the left, you may find a Christian Protestant believer, maybe belong to a charismatic church. But in Jamaica at night, you may not want to go out to the street alone, because there is a danger that you might be killed on the street, even though the country is so religious. But if you go to Denmark, Denmark may claim to be a Christian country, but in fact, you should not be deceived by such a claim, because it is a completely humanistic country, and humanistic person in society, in fact. But at night, you can go out to the street alone, in dark, with a kind of, sense of security, and you can enjoy the nightlife in Denmark, even though this is not a religious country. And he said, look around the world, where are battles and conflicts and wars going on. And basically all of those countries are religious countries. Religion, whatever name that might be, including Christianity, without the confirmed image of Christ Jesus, religion can be even more dangerous than non-religion. That's an argument of many of the atheists and humanists today. Richard Dawkins, for example, the guy who is a very famous atheist, Oxford professor, who wrote a book, famous book, Selfish Gene, or God Delusion, and so on. And he said religion actually destroyed the human civilization. There are so many self-proclaiming godly Christians around us in Christian churches whose character is not conformed to the image of Christ, and they are using their religion only to make themselves look better. Well, how about us instead of talking to other people, look inside of us and examining ourselves whether we are truly conformed to Christ Jesus as men and women of God. I wonder what sort of conclusion we'll be able to bring out. Well, today I decided to talk about Daniel instead of character. Maybe I will reserve that topic for the next time. And by the way, it is my delight to be with you this morning once again. The book of Daniel is one of the most fascinating books in the Old Testament. It is a part of minor prophets. There are major prophets and prophetic books and minor prophetic books in the Old Testament. They are not because major prophetic books are more important than minor prophetic books, but rather in terms of volumes. Major prophetic books are bigger than the minor prophetic books. That's why simply the names are kind of, different like that. There are many prophecies in this book, the book of Daniel, that the Bible students have studied over many centuries, if not millennia. There are many symbolic words in the book which are not easy to understand. Among all these intriguing and thought-provoking subjects from the book, I'm going to focus on one person who is the author of this book, Daniel himself. The book of Daniel is quite intriguing and very important, at the same time very difficult to understand. So that's why if someone is really interested in the doctrine of eschatology or the book of Revelation, oftentimes the person is advised to study the book of Daniel first. And so it's almost like a stepping stone to understand the letter they teach us in the scriptures. Daniel was a very unique person in many ways. We know that there are so many giants of faith in the scriptures, such as Noah, Abraham, David, and many other people. Though those individuals lived a remarkable life that has been exemplary to all of us, the scripture also tells us about their failures. Sometimes their failures are properly classified as serious faults and sins. However, from the life of Daniel, there is no single blemish that has compromised his integrity or his sincerity. I cannot say that he was a perfect man because there is no perfectly righteous person on this planet. However, the Holy Spirit has not left any blemish on his character and on his life in this holy writing. If we know that he did not live in his homeland, and that he did not have a temple to go for regular worship, daily basis or weekly basis, we will be more impressed by him than ever before. Even he did not have the presence of the priests around him for his religious life. He did not enjoy bringing burnt and peace offerings to the temple of God because there was no temple of God where he lived. There are many reasons why we need to know of him and learn about him. Daniel shows us how to live for God when everything is against us, even in the pagan society, even in the society which is against the Christian faith and the beliefs, how we should live. He is showing those examples. He was a man who was fully content with God alone, regardless of where he lived and what sort of circumstances he was in. Daniel and his three friends were taken into captivity in 605 BC, during the reign of King Jehoiakim. And these individuals left from their homeland, and a few years later, they heard that the house of God, the beautiful Solomonic temple in Jerusalem, was burned down by the merciless hands of the Babylonian soldiers. When he was taken to Babylon, he was about 14 years old, and in fact he was taken as a captive by the Babylonians even before the prophet Ezekiel. He was taken away from all his familiar things, including his family, homeland, food, customs, and language, and many other things. He was taken into a strange land. He was not like a thriving plant in a professional greenhouse, but he was exposed to all kinds of storms, rains, and hails, and even enmity of men, animosity, jealousy experienced by from coming from his enemies. Think again that he was about only 14 years old boy, a captive in an enemy's territory, only 14 years old. He was forced to receive a powerful and subtle form of indoctrination in Babylon through education, change the name, and the different cultural experiences. There were constant influxes of temptations to change his true identity. Daniel's name means God is my judge, but he was forced to change his name to Belshazzar, which means Bel's prince, and you can imagine that Bel was a name of one of the Babylonian gods according to Isaiah 46 verse 1. He was supposed to be a servant to the pagan god Bel. All his three friends were in the same situation. Hananiah means whom Jehovah had favored, but was changed to Shadrach, inspired by the sun god. Mishael means who is what God is, became Meshach, which means who is comparable to Shach. And Azariah, which means whom Jehovah helps, became Abednego, servant of the shining fire. Thus, they lost their Hebrew identities by having foreign names. I was told that when Korea was under the occupation, Japanese occupation, all the Koreans were forced to change their names so that they should be like the Japanese. So exactly the same thing happened to Daniel and his three friends. Thus, they lost their Hebrew identity by having foreign names. But change the names could not change their hearts. Daniel and his three friends still remained true to their God. What important lessons can we learn from it? Well, we may say that we are living in a very unchristian environment. I'm sure that sooner or later, all kinds of unbiblical even policies and legal matters brought into your own society. You understand that there have been controversies over homosexual marriage issue here in Singapore, and in fact about a year ago already it became legalized in Australia. You know, pastors asked me what I felt about all those changes. Well, basically the society environment is really pushing people to say yes to such a thing. And I think homosexual lobby groups are very smart in terms of their propaganda. A lot of people do have kind of unkind attitude for the term, like homosexual marriage or gay marriage and so on, but their lobby groups have changed their kind of familiar propaganda phrase to marriage equality. Who does not like to promote the idea of equality? So as soon as Christians are saying no to homosexual marriage, Christians are being blamed or accused as people who are bigots, who are narrow-minded people because they are against equality. And same thing is coming. Well, in fact, the real issue is not really homosexual marriage. Real issue is actually transgenderism, and I think it is on the way. Well, we are living in that sort of environment. I'm a marriage celebrant in Australia as well. So every year I'm supposed to go through certain trainings, ongoing professional trainings to keep that marriage celebrant status. And today, this year, compulsory classes are basically about how to deal with, how to conduct homosexual marriages and legal point of view. We are living in such an environment. The culture of the day constantly seduces us and our children to desire and follow wrong people and the wrong objectives. From music, movies, vulgarity of languages, dresses, morality, to every part of our experiences in this world. true Christians are often challenged to change their views and attitudes. So, at the end of that campaign for leading to the referendum to accept legalized homosexual marriage last year, there was obviously anti-group. Christians were against such a legislation. And because they were so much in minority side, their propaganda or their promoting phrase was something like this: it is okay to say no. It is okay to say no to that legalization effort. That much Christians were conquered and they were in minority group. Saying no is not easy in our relationships with our colleagues and friends. Later on, Daniel was a target of everybody's jealousy. It was not because he did something wrong, but his purity was a cause behind everybody's jealousy. Near perfection. His righteous living was the cause that brought him into troubles. His true faith to God was a cause to bring him into many troubles. What his enemies wanted from him was his life. That much they hated him. Or these murderous eyes were lurking in every corner to find out just one fault from him that might bring him down from his position. Temptations were not just from outside. He was a man of high position, and he did not feel pinched financially at all. All these comfortable conditions of life could have slowed him down from his fervent and passionate services and following God for the Lord. But nothing prevented him from serving God. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 11 describes the believers of God as strangers and pilgrims in this world. As a genuine pilgrim, Daniel had a life being fully content with God alone, or other things including his desires, pleasures, dreams, disappointments. Despairing moments were only secondary to God's life. Always his eyes were fixed upon God himself. It will be meaningful for us to examine our life and desires and to know where our contentment has been or is at this point of time. I want to study of this exemplary man of God, Daniel, this morning in three different stages of his life, as we read in chapter 1, chapter 9, and chapter 10. And we should have read also chapter 6, a portion of it at least. But I'm going to talk about Daniel as a man who was content with God alone, as a young man, as a mature man, and as a man in twilight years. First of all, let me begin with Daniel as a man who was content with God alone, as a young man. One brilliant and shiny testimony about the youthful life of Daniel is that he lived in the most evil and violent age in the Hebrew history. We know that the northern 10 tribes of Israel were already wiped out from their lands, and they were all scattered all over the world within the Babylonian Empire. Instead, strangers and foreigners were brought into their land, and as a result, they were mixed blood, born and made and produced, which are called as the Samaritans. So the 10 tribes of Israel were all gone. They were not in existence anymore. There was no more existence of the northern kingdom of Israel. The southern kingdom, Judah, was as sinful as her destroyed counterpart in the north. And her spiritual condition is very much well described in the book of Jeremiah, as we studied before. We know that Jeremiah and Daniel were contemporaries. It is because, as I told you before, he was about 14 years old when he was taken into captivity, and it was 605 BC. And we know that Jeremiah was very actively serving around the 620 BC, and probably 586 when Babylonians destroyed and conquered the city of Jerusalem and beyond. Therefore, we know that Daniel and Jeremiah were contemporaries, and by knowing what sort of society or religious and spiritual life Israelites had during the time of Jeremiah, we may know what kind of spiritual condition actually Daniel was able to eyewitness, and in what sort of spiritual environment he must have lived. So, by just looking into the book of Jeremiah once again, we shall know what kind of spiritual environment or influences he could have received from outside exclusively. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 8 says, "The priest said not, 'Where is the Lord?' And they that handle the law knew me not, knew me not. The pastors also transgressed against me, and the prophets prophesied my mouth, and walked after things that do not profit." Here is an amazing charge or accusation against the children of Israel. The priests are not looking for God. Where is God? And besides that, the priests and the pastors, they really did not know anything about the law of God. They themselves were transgressors of the law of God. They were simple. Besides that, the prophets prophesied by quoting and pagan God Baal's name, and they walked after things that do not profit. Prophet talks about idolatry. So the priests and pastors themselves did not know the Lord, but they were the ones who were handling the law of God inside of the children of the people of God. They themselves transgressed against God and went after vain things. Thus Daniel could have blamed the religious leaders for his spiritual ignorance or lukewarm heart. But it was not the case at all. He knew God and was passionate for his spiritual pursuit. I have known a lot of professing Christians who are blaming constantly their churches and their pastors for their lukewarmness in their spiritual life. Why they are not growing, why they are not zealous for the Lord, why they become so cold, or why they are not passionate for God, why they are so ignorant of the things of God. They are blaming pastors, churches, and church leaders, and so on. But here, look at Daniel. There was nobody who was able to give him religious instructions from the laws of God, even if he lived in Jerusalem. Jeremiah chapter 2 verse 13 says, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed them out the cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water." So they forsake their God, fountain of living waters. The nation of Judah forsook the fountain of living waters, which was God Himself. The whole populace, from the top to the bottom, was rotten and corrupted. By just reading the first and second Kings and first, second Chronicles, we know that the kings were terribly corrupt and corrupted. If you look at the genealogies of kings during the time of Prophet Jeremiah, obviously, eventually, Judah was conquered and destroyed. Even though there was a king, Josiah, who brought a little bit of spiritual freshness into the life, spiritual life of the children of Israel, but still, the children of Israel really were not changed. If you are familiar to the Old Testament materials, you know that King Josiah has been known as the King of Reformation, spiritual revival. But the interesting thing is that while he was alive, a lot of Reformation work was done. And how much changes he was able to bring into the mind and spiritual life of the children of Israel. Well, as soon as he died, the people just went back to their old life. And that is the situation, condition you can find from the book of Jeremiah. And in fact, Josiah was a great king, but his father was Amnon. And Amnon was a terribly evil guy, and his father was another terrible guy. So from the top to the bottom, in the politics, And in religious life, everything was corrupt and everything was rotten and decayed. Therefore, God pronounced the destructive consequences upon the whole country in Jeremiah chapter 2:19. Thine own wickedness shall correct thee, and thy backslidings shall reprove thee. Know therefore and see that it is an evil thing and bitter, that thou hast forsaken the Lord thy God, and that my fear is not in thee, said the Lord, the God of hosts. So people, the nation of Judah, forsook God, and they forgot about him, and there was no fear of the Lord within them. Hear the lamenting voice of the Lord from Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 32. Can a maid forget her ornaments, or a bride her attire? Yet my people have forgotten me days without number, for a long period of time. Even children of God did not remember him. God charged his servant Jeremiah with a very uncommon command in Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 16. Therefore pray not thou for this people. In other words, they are even beyond the time of prayers. There is no more necessity for them to pray. Time is over. Neither lift up cry nor prayer for them, neither make intercession to me, for I will not hear thee. Opportunities are not forever available. Opportunities have only time-limited chances, if I use the word chances. It is not forever available. Was there at any other time when God commanded his servants not to pray for sinful nations or sinful people? The whole nation of Judah was dark. Thus listen to what God had to say about his own people in Jeremiah 14, verses 10 to 12. 14:10 to 12. Thus saith the Lord unto this people, thus have they loved to wander, they have not refrained their feet, therefore the Lord doth not accept them. He will now remember their iniquity and visit their sins. Then said the Lord unto me, pray not for this people for their good. When they fast, I will not hear their cry. And when they offer burnt offering and an oblation, I will not accept them, but I will consume them by the sword, and by the famine, and by the pestilence. So if there is anything that God wanted to deliver to the children of Israel, was a pronouncement of his final judgment. Famine, destruction, death, and diseases. Daniel was born and grew up in the spiritually simple and apostate age. What he saw, what he experienced around him was only sinful and wicked. When he was taken into Babylon, finally, things were not getting better at all. He was in the heart of the land of idolatry, Babylonian Empire idolatry. But all these pressures and strong forces to change the mind of Daniel were not very effective against him at all. It is a great contrast that modern man blames virtually everything for his misdemeanors, sinful behaviors, wicked lifestyle, and evilness, even spiritual dullness. It says that his upbringing was a real cause of his very bad behavior. His poor family is a real cause behind his problems. In fact, instead of me, my parents must be blamed for their wrong kind of upbringing. They have not provided all the things that I needed, really, and many more, and they are bringing all kinds of causes and blaming everybody for their wrongs. But despite all these trials, Daniel stood up above all of us as a beautiful man of God, beyond any reproaches. Daniel was given food from the king's table. This food was offered to idols first before served. The righteous man Daniel could not partake of the idolatrous practices, and thus he asked the chief officer in chapter 1, the book of Daniel, verse 8, that he should be excused, spared from taking the king's meal. There was one reason for his boldness. It is because chapter 1 verse 8, the first part of the verse says, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat. He refused to be defiled for God's sake. Many of the modern men, even professing believers, will say that Daniel was an extremist, too much fundamentalist. They say to us that we are too extreme when we refuse to listen to wrong music, to consume alcohols, to burn cigarettes, to promote morality and purity, and not to yield ourselves to pleasures. People are saying that we are unrealistic. They may say that we are cowards and we do not have enough courage to take the things from the world. But true courage comes when we fear the Lord our God. And Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself. So all of our young people must purpose in their hearts not to defile themselves. When students are living away from their parents, they must purpose in their hearts not to defile themselves. We have been in Adelaide and in London. We have seen a lot of young men and women coming from Singapore, even busy churches. And we know that their spiritual life has gone into total destruction, disarray, disarrangement, and disorderliness. When they were together with their parents are forcing them to come to church to serve the Lord every Sunday, so whether they like it or not, they follow the parents' instructions. But when they are alone, finally, they came to a point to make their decisions before God for their own spiritual journey. Even this year, Pastor Willie knows when Joel came, there was another young lady, but she's not with us anymore. And it's not a uncommon story. And we have seen so many young people gone astray from church-going life to even God-defying sort of attitude, from one extreme to another. When working adults go away from home for their works, they must purpose in their hearts not to defile themselves. Did Daniel have peer pressures? Of course. Did he have a social pressures? Of course. Did he put himself in danger by saying no to the offers from the world? Yes. But he purposed in his heart not to defile himself. As someone said, nobody loses out by refusing to compromise. End of quote. If Daniel did not stand firmly at this point as a young man, could he possibly stand up for his conviction later when he was threatened with death? Even death threats in a lion's den. In all situations, Daniel put God first before all other considerations. The outcome of his full stand for God gave him wisdom and promotions. He was 10 times better than others. Stuart Olliott says about his country, England, in his commentary on Daniel, in quote, the decline started when the church began to compromise. The more it has tried to be trendy, and with it, the less influence for God has been made upon the people. When the churches began to water down their message so that they no longer preached anything that was offensive, such as hell and miracles, that was the moment when they lost their power. End of quote. Aren't you compromising your Christian conviction for worldly recognition and popularity as young people? For your career development, even. Daniel, as a young man, purposed in his heart not to defile himself because he was content with God alone in his youthful years. Then we come to the next stage of his life. As a mature man, Daniel was still content with God alone. As a mature man. And we are coming to chapter 6, part of chapter 9. In fact, if we study chronology, maybe chapter 6, chapter 9, and chapter 10, time difference is very minor. But I would like to take chapter 6 as a part of his mature stage in his life. By this time, the Babylonian Empire became a part of history. By chapter 6, Babylonian Empire was already conquered. It was already gone. The Medes and Persians conquered the land, and a new dynasty was in power. As a new king, Darius was on the throne. He had an enormous task to administer the vast empire under his rule. Thus, he had put his administrative work into the hands of 120 satraps, and they were answerable to 3 presidents right under the king. That was the way that the kingdom was to be managed and administered, because the empire was too big. Just like during the time of Roman Empire, empire was too big to be ruled by one king, one emperor. So as a result, one emperor decided to have 2 vice emperors, and so one was stationing in Rome, while another one was stationing in Constantinople. So the 2 vice presidents or vice emperors were ruling 2 parts of the empires, and eventually the emperor died, one of them died for power, the winner becomes the next emperor. And that was the beginning of the breach or breakup of the Eastern and Western churches. The one who was in Rome became Western Church, and the other one in Constantinople became Eastern Orthodox Church. So political division eventually made the church divisions in church history. So in the same way, Darius ruled over his empire by having his own delegates. So 3 presidents right under him, and there were 120 satraps to report all the affairs to those 3 presidents. This way, Darius was able to control the kingdom. And one of the 3, those 3 presidents was Daniel. And in fact, King Darius wanted to take Daniel to be the most outstanding person amongst all these people, which brought lots of people to be jealous eventually. By this time, Daniel was not a young man anymore, and he was already in quite advanced age. According to chapter 6, verse 3, he was preferred above the presidents and princes, and the king thought of setting over the whole kingdom. And it is very interesting to know that Daniel was advanced to such a high position in a different regime. We know that in chapter 1, he was a captive young man to be trained to be a servant to the Babylonian king. So he was inside of a Babylonian government. But by now, Babylonian Empire was overtaken by Medes and Persians. But how come he was still maintaining such a high-rank government official position? That is truly a mystery. It is not a Babylonian kingdom anymore. Even in today's politics, when there is a change in power, ministers are changed. How much more do we expect that Daniel was a forgotten man by the new regime by this time? He was not a Mede, he was not a Persian, and he was not a Babylonian either. However, he was promoted to such a high position. How could someone who had been so prominent in the defeated and demolished and destroyed the kingdom came to such a high honor in the conquering government, occupying forces? Again, chapter 6, verse 3 says that the reason for Darius to keep Daniel was that there was an excellent spirit in him. If you look at that passage carefully, you know that The Spirit has just a small letter. It's not a capital letter. Therefore, it does not simply say that because Holy Spirit was dwelling inside of him, he became an outstanding person. In fact, the translators are using a small letter, excellent small letter S, Spirit in him. In other words, he had the spirit of fearing the Lord. The fear of the Lord ruled in his heart. When we advance in age and position, we often experience, even though very much reluctantly, some sort of compromises, more and more. Oh, we don't like the conflicts. We don't like to bring any disharmony, disunity into this and that. And we begin to look for a little bit easy ways to live. And we want to have a smoother course rather than rough courses. We often compromise more. It is a part of our nature. We do not like a conflict with other people. We do not want to lose our stability in finance and social position. In workplaces, there is always an opportunity to pervert the justice a little bit for more profits and gains, and everybody does it anyway. We are more geared to gain more profits. Thus, so easily we give up our younger days of principles and make more compromises. Darius could not see those things from Daniel. The integrity, innocency, and faith in God that Daniel had in his youth never departed from his life, from his heart. He was still ruled by God in his advanced age. Though Daniel was only a stranger in the land without his political support groups behind him, he lived in the land of adversity only through God. His excellent spiritual quality was not unnoticeable. His political foes made a trap to catch him with a crime of treason. However, the problem was that they could not find any fault with him except his religious integrity and faithfulness to his God. He was banned from praying to God for 30 days, but it was something that he could not keep and follow. Even though there was a king's decree that he was not supposed to pray to any other gods but to the king himself for the following 30 days, he could not keep such a decree. He opened the windows 3 times a day as usual to pray to God toward his lost homeland, Jerusalem. How could he forget Jerusalem? That's the place where he grew up, he was born. That's the place where he saw the glory of Solomonic temple. That's the place where he saw the priest burning incenses and the burning sacrifices unto God. How could he forget the city of Jerusalem? The threat of death against anyone who prayed not to the king, but to other gods for the next 30 days was announced in the entire empire. And obviously, because of his position, Daniel knew all of this. Such a decree could not escape from his office. He could not stop it. But he did not stop doing what was right. Even the heavens might fall, and he would lose his life. He fell on his face before God as usual. And he continued to pray to the Almighty God 3 times a day by opening the windows toward the city of Jerusalem. In his mind, consequences were God's portion. Consequences were his work. He had learned to say no to all appearances of evil as a young lad, and now he is still able to say no to all appearances of evil as a mature person. As a result, he was thrown into a lion's den. My friends, there are probably some things we need to learn from them.
a young man who purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself in chapter 1 verse 8 has not been changed for all these years. Not in Jerusalem, but in a foreign land, in an idolatrous land. Praise the Lord. He would have been tempted not to pray to God for the next 30 days. Or he was probably sometimes tempted by other people even to make his faith in secret just for 30 days. 3 times a day. Whenever he prayed to God, temptations could have come into his own heart. Let me not open the windows as usual. Maybe from 3 times to none, but still in my private life I can maintain prayer life. I do not have to open the windows to let everyone see and everyone know that I'm praying to God. Even without that, God can hear my voices and prayers. In my secret room, God's Spirit is there. Therefore, I do not have to do it the same way as I have been doing. But as the years had gone by, his love for the Lord and his devotion and commitment to Him had been deepened, never compromised. There was nothing to sever God from him. My mature aged friends, how about your spiritual life today? Are you still keeping the same spiritual purity and spiritual willingness and determination to follow Jesus that you once had as a young man or as a young woman? Daniel had an unbroken consistency in serving the Lord. He was content with God alone in his advanced years. Lastly, Daniel was content with God alone in his twilight years. Again, we are going back to Daniel during the years of King Darius in chapter 9, verse 1. In the first year of the reign of King Darius, which was 539 BC, Daniel was already a very old man. He was already well over 80 years old. Until this time, he valiantly stood by faith in the Holy Land for 68 years. Or with Jewish calculation, 68 years since the time of his captivity. So he lived in that captivity longer than he lived in his own land, Jerusalem. All these years, he had not compromised on any occasion with a temptation that could have made him unfaithful. Daniel chapter 9 verse 2 says, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. Many years had gone by since he saw the city of God, Jerusalem, for the last time. However, his faith was as fresh as ever. No temptation had successfully broken his faith and spirit. Neither his elevation to the top in the empire, nor his success could not seduce him to love the world more than God. It is a great difference between him and many of our professing Christian brethren in Christ Jesus today. How many of us must be rebuked by the Lord, as he said in Isaiah 29 verse 13, wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draw near me with their mouth and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. As a result of our long service to the Lord in Christian churches, we know how to behave ourselves in Christian churches and how to conduct ourselves, how to do, how to pray, how to minister to the people. But our hearts may not be as fresh as before in relation to our relationship with our God. Thus our lips are very near to God all the time, but our hearts are far away from God. That was what happened to the children of Israel. One day, as usual, Daniel was reading God's Word and meditating upon it. This great man, well over 80 years old, as usual, he opened the scriptures, he was reading the Old Testament scriptures. A fresh vision came to him while he was reading Jeremiah's prophecies. Jeremiah said in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 25, verses 8 to 11, and chapter 29, verses 10 to 14. And those two passages are actually talking about God's promises given to the children of Israel. Having read the prophecy given to the children of Israel, Daniel was reminded once again of the faithfulness of God. As he was reading chapter 25, verse 11, he saw the coming fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecies. It is because in that passage God promised to the children of Israel that their captivity would not be forever, but for 70 years. So after 70 years of captivity, they will be released and they will come home. They will return to their homeland. Daniel had been in captivity by now for 68 years according to the Jewish calculation. We can imagine how his heart jumped with joy and gladness. All these years, every day he was living and sleeping and waking up in a foreign country, and now 60 years have gone by, and as he was reading Jeremiah's prophecy given by the Lord concerning the duration of the captivity of the children of Israel, 2 more years to go. 2 more years. All 68 years are gone. The shame of being captives in an ungodly pagan land was about to be ended up by the promise of God. Nothing clear sign is not shown to them yet. But the prophecy is there. Why pagan king wants to release their servants from their land, from services. Let them continue to serve in our land. Why pagan king wants to send them away? But here is a promise. Just 2 more years if we wait, we will go home. That insight came into the mind of Daniel. Can you imagine that he had opened his windows for the last 68 years? 68 years in the foreign land. Every day, 3 times a day before the Jerusalem, he opened the window and he prayed to God for the Jerusalem while waiting for the freedom of his people. Verse 3 in the 9th chapter of Daniel says, "And I set my face unto the Lord God, to seek by prayer and supplications, with fasting and sackcloth and ashes." I cannot imagine that this elderly man, a highly honored and respected person in the whole empire, bent on his knees once again before God. He stopped eating the kingly feast and he was fasting, in fact. And he began to pray with a fasting in sackcloth and ashes. Wearing sackcloth is a sign of repentance. What had he done against God that compelled him to stop eating and to wear sackcloth and to sit down in ashes? Make a confession of his sins. What had this man of God done wrong? Verse 4, chapter 9. "And I prayed unto the Lord my God, and made my confession and said, O Lord, the great and dreadful God, keeping the covenant and mercy to them that love him, and to them that keep his commandments." His confessions, he's making confessions of his sins here in this verse. He's praying for his nation, and he's praying for the people of God. He's making confessions of the sins of his nation, Judah, because Judah broke the covenant with God. Judah became captives, captured by the enemies. The people of God had 2 more years to go before they would be released by their captors to return home. But this man of God sat down and prayed to God with fasting. Fasting for his own countrymen, for his own people. He prayed for his people who were set to go to Jerusalem. And that is not all. We come to Daniel chapter 10 verse 1. In the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. And the thing was true, but the time appointed was wrong. And he understood a thing and had understanding of vision. The third year of Cyrus' rule as king over Babylon was 536 BC. It was 2 years after he prayed in chapter 9. Cyrus had issued a decree allowing the Jews to return to their homeland to build their temple in 538 BC. So some of them had departed that same year under Zerubbabel's leadership. They had reinstituted the sacrifices by 537 according to Ezra chapter 3 verse 6. And by 536 BC, they had begun to rebuild the temple according to Ezra chapter 3 verse 8. And Daniel would have been in his mid-80s or upper age 80s in 536 BC. And that was the time he was making prayers unto God in chapter 10. His age may account for his no return to the promised land. He did not go back to Jerusalem, maybe because of his age. He could not return home. But he never forgot his homeland. He never forgot Israel. Chapter 10, verses 2 and 3. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 whole weeks. His own people already went back to their own homeland. But for 3 weeks, he was mourning. Verse 3, I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. The elderly man of God, this elderly servant, still stood firmly in the Lord's service by mourning for his own people. God gave him revelations concerning the future. And his life has been very much lonely in the Holy Land. But he had always been together with God alone. He stood firmly for the name of God without making any compromise. He was content with God alone in his twilight years. I'm sure that each and every one of us does have our own life issues in different stages. As a young person, as a mature person, as more senior elder people. We may have different issues and different problems in life. Maybe there are lots of afflictions and afflictions. And sometimes our expectations are not met and we are in trials and difficulties. But I wonder whether if you are elderly folks, whether you have kept your first promise that you have made unto God as young people, as young men and women, when you received the Lord as your personal Savior, as you committed your life unto God. And mature people, do you remember the day of your conversion? And how about you today? Young people, are you keeping your life straight, right, good and just? And are you determined not to defile yourselves before the presence of God? I'm sure that as believers, professing believers of God, one way or another, we did have opportunities to commit ourselves unto the Lord. And sometimes we did make our promises unto Him. Or our willingness was confessed unto God in terms of our dedication and commitment unto Him. My wife and I met in a very small pioneering church, and we serve the Lord there together. And our pastor was a good man. I cannot say that he was a man of studies. So I'm not sure how much Bible studies has he done in his he has done in his private life and at home or in his own library. Sometimes his messages were coming from newspapers and magazines, and a lot of interesting stories. But I personally felt very much hungry under his ministry. But he was a good man. He was a man of prayer. At least 1/3 of a year, he spent the night behind the pulpit, bending on his knees, and he was praying to God. He fasted 40 days, 3 times during his ministry. So under his ministry, many of us young people were challenged, and we took our turns to pray with fasting. So 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, we young people took our turns to fast prayers. At least 2 nights a week, we went to a nearby prayer mountain because our church was not big enough, and if we pray sometimes loudly or we talk at night loudly, that noise goes out to the neighbors. So we were using a nearby mountain for a place to pray. So about 2 nights a week, we all together went around 11 o'clock at night. We were loaded in a church van, and we went to that mountain, and we spent all night in prayer when it was rainy day or snowy day in winter. And then came down from the hill, the mountain, early in the morning. We went home and washed ourselves, and we went back to school or to study. And we followed our pastor's example in that way. In those days, I personally made a lot of promises to God. And in the mountain, oftentimes I prayed to the Lord that my life is His. And if there is an honor to be given for me to give my life for His ministry, I will do so. And when once in a while I look back, what kind of spiritual life I have been maintaining all these years. And I'm asking myself with the same question whether I could say the same thing to the Lord, just in case if the Lord is calling me to go somewhere in danger, risking my own life, so maybe I may have to give my life up for Him. Am I going to say the same thing as I said as a young man? Well, my friends, you must have done your part of commitment and promises unto God, willingness and determination in following Jesus Christ. How are you today? Daniel was a man true to God from his youth until his twilight years. He had refused to compromise with the world. He had a purpose in his heart not to defile himself. It must be a message to our young people, middle-aged and senior members of our church, to be true to their God, until the last moment. Daniel was content. He was a man who was content with God alone in all his life circumstances. And I hope that you and I will be the men and women like Daniel, who will be content with God the rest of our lives. Let us look to the Lord in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful and grateful for the life example we have learned from Daniel. As a young man,
as a